Hey friends, welcome to Wednesday night here at Grace Christian Church. I'm Travis, the media director, and we're going through the book of Acts. Tonight we're on chapter 27, and Pastor PJ is going to be here in just a moment to break that down for us. So grab your Bible, grab your notebook, get ready to worship God with us with the Word and allow it to transform our hearts and our minds and our spirits. God is so good and He wants to speak to you tonight. So let's press in and listen. Here we go.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. No matter what time you're watching this, we are glad that you are here with us, joining us for our Bible class as we study through the book of Acts. On behalf of the whole team that is walking through this with you, I want to say welcome, and we are honored and glad that you're here. We're in Acts chapter 27. But as we go into Acts chapter 27, I'd like to read a little bit of Acts chapter 26 that leads into Acts chapter 27, okay? Because the first verse of Acts chapter 27 says, "And when it was determined that we should sail into Italy, they delivered Paul and certain other prisoners, and one named Julius, a centurion of Augustus' band." Now, the author of Acts is writing from the perspective of being there, and he is telling a continual story that comes from Acts chapter 26. So I want to go to that first. Paul had just got finished talking to King Agrippa and was giving him the message of the gospel, was talking to King Agrippa about how Jesus is living, his dying, his resurrecting, and how now we have to make a choice on what to do with this Jesus Christ. This is the most important question that all of us, every human that has ever existed, has to answer. What will you do with Jesus? So Agrippa, King in verse 27, Paul is talking to King Agrippa and saying, "King Agrippa, believest thou the prophets? I know that thou believest." And then King Agrippa said unto Paul, "Almost thou persuadest me, Paul, to be a Christian." So he was teetering on the edge there. Because he did indeed believe, but he was trying to push through his feelings about the subject in order to step through. Isn't that what so much of us have done? We have the evidence and we believe it, yet we can't push past our own things to get through it, to get to Jesus. So Agrippa was a bit conflicted here, because I will tell you in verse 30, it says, "And when he had thus spoken, the king rose up, and the governor, and Bernice, and they sat with them. And when they were gone aside, they talked between themselves, saying, This man doeth nothing worthy of death or bonds. Then said Agrippa to Festus, who was the governor, this man might have been set at liberty if he had not appealed to Caesar." So the reason why we're going in verse 27, going to Italy, is because Paul had appealed to speak to Caesar. He wanted to talk the high up the chain, and he wanted to be able to present his case and argue his case. He had already talked to Festus, had talked to Agrippa and Bernice, had talked to so many different people, but he said, "I want to talk to Caesar." And the other two were willing to let him go, but because they didn't see anything that this man was worthy of dying for. However, he appealed to talk to Caesar, so they were sending him to Italy. Chapter 27, verse 1, we'll start with there. I want to read, there's quite a good amount here to read, so would you mind reading with me? "And when it was determined," this is Acts chapter 27, verse 1, "And when it was determined that we should sail into Italy, they delivered Paul and certain other prisoners unto one named Julius, a centurion of Augustus' band. And entering into a ship of Adramyttium," that's fun to say, "Adramyttium we launched, meaning to sail by the coast of Asia, one Aristarchus, a Macedonian of Thessalonica, being with us. And the next day we touched at Sidon, and Julius courteously entreated Paul and gave him liberty to go to his friends to refresh himself." They were treating Paul with respect. Paul treated them with respect and then showed them the love of Christ while giving all the gospel. And in turn, they treated him as not just another prisoner. They treated him with respect and gave him honor as well, which I think is actually, I like how the Bible makes a point to let us see that. Verse 4, and when we had launched from thence, we sailed under Cyprus, because the winds were contrary. And when we had sailed over the sea of Sicilia and Pamphylia, we came to Myra, a city of Lycia. And there the centurion found a ship. Can I say this real fast? The Bible is full of like evidences. I like this because they didn't just say, and we sailed along and we went some places. They literally give us descriptive places that can be researched so that we can prove it out in evidence. When they were writing these letters to the other church members and to the different people there, this was stuff that could be researched. They wanted a paper trail. They wanted a paper trail that led to the cross. And I love how the scripture all throughout the New Testament, we have plenty of evidence, Old Testament as well, but New Testament, because we're in the New Testament right now, there are plenty of evidences. I just thought about this while we were studying this. There are plenty of evidences that the writers leave so that the people can follow the paper trail to the cross, to Jesus, to the resurrection. The Bible itself, all the paper pages are a paper trail that leads straight to Jesus. And so there's plenty of evidence that can be verified to solidify you in your trust in Christ. Okay, I'm going to keep going. I wanted to put that in there. All right. Verse 6, and there a centurion found a ship of Alexandria sailing into Italy, and he put us therein. And when we had sailed slowly many days, and scarce were come over against Cnidus, the wind not suffering us, we sailed unto Crete, and against Salmone. And hardly passing it, came into a place which is called the Fair Havens, nigh whereunto was the city of Lasea. Now, when much time was spent, when the sailing was now dangerous, because the fast was now already past, Paul admonished them. Now, Paul is talking to all of them. Remember, he was given the ability to speak and to be free about the ship or be with his people. And so they would listen to him. And Paul admonished them, where he's saying, listen. And he said unto them, sirs, I perceive that this voyage will be with hurt and much damage, not only of the lading and ship, but also of our lives. Nevertheless, the centurion, he didn't listen to Paul. He believed the master and the owner of the ship, the people that did the sailing, more than those things which were spoken by Paul. Now, I wouldn't even think of it this way. He was just coming into contact with Paul. Think of it from his perspective. Do I believe this man that I'm just now getting to know, that I may or may not have seen any miracles he may have done, versus the word of a seasoned lifetime sailor, who has been sailing these seas long enough to become the master of a ship? He is someone who knows what he's talking about versus a man I barely know. So I understand why he chose to follow. I don't necessarily agree, and I can't say that I would have, but I do understand why he made that choice. And it says here, and he believed the master and the owner of the ship more than those things which were spoken by Paul. And because the haven was not commodious to winter in, the more part advised to depart thence also, if by any means we might attain to Phoenix, and there to winter, which is a haven of Crete, and lieth towards the southwest and northwest. And when the wind blew softly, supposing that they had obtained their purpose, losing thence, they sailed close to Crete. But not long after it arose against it a tempestuous wind called Euroclydon. And when the ship was caught and could not bear up into the wind, we let her drive. So that ship was just going pretty much on its own. We let the wind drive us where it wanted to go. And running under a certain island, which is called Claudia, we had much work to come by the boat, which when they had taken up, they used helps undergirding the ship, fearing lest they should fall into the quicksands, straight sail, and were so driven. And being exceedingly tossed with the tempest, and the next day lightened the ship, And the third day we cast out with our own hands the tackling of the ship. So what they're doing is they're tossing things over. They're tossing heavy things over, things that would weigh the ship down to make it lighter so that it won't capsize as easy, to make it easier to sail. Okay? So all of these things, and it says, verse 20, and when neither sun nor stars in many days appeared, so it was a dark storm for days, and no small tempest or tumultuous storm lay on us, all hope that we should be saved was then taken away. So these guys were giving up. They were like, we hadn't seen the sun. We don't know what day it is. It seems like we're just being in this storm, a nonstop, endless storm. And we just might as well give up. And I love this says here in verse 21, but after long abstinence, Paul stood forth in the midst of them and said, Sirs, ye should have hearkened unto me, and not have loosed from Crete, and to have gained this harm and loss. And I now exhort you to be of good cheer, for there shall be no loss of any man's life among you, but of the ship. For there stood by me this night the angel of God, whose I am and whom I serve, saying, Fear not, Paul, you must be brought before Caesar. And lo, God hath given thee all them that set sail with thee. Wherefore, sirs, be of good cheer, for I believe God, that it shall be even as it was told me. Now, it goes on farther and farther, where the storm continues to beat the ship to the point that they lose the ship and they're set adrift, and then they come up on an island and they all rescue on the island. None of them die, none of them perish. It is as Paul said. But what I want to talk about here, I read all of that stuff to kind of build the story and to build what's going on here. First of all, Agrippa and Festus were of the idea that Paul should just go free. Okay? He shouldn't even be here. As far as we're concerned, he doesn't need to go see Caesar, but he's got to go see Caesar because he asked to go see Caesar. So Paul gets ready to do it, but he's like, hey, fellas, I think we should wait a while. I think we should just chill for a minute, because if not, this is going to be a heavy storm, and it's going to bring much destruction to our ship, to the laden, so in other words, to the cargo you're carrying, and to our lives. But instead, they push on to what they did not believe what Paul said, for whatever reasons they chose, what we talked about. But instead, they pushed on because the commander said, oh, it'll be just fine. And what happened is exactly what Paul said. It not only did it destroy the cargo, because it had to be tossed over, destroyed the ship, and destroyed their confidence. These gentlemen went from being sure of themselves as sailors to ready to die, it seems. It seems like they were just like all hope was gone. The darkness was so long in their lives that they were ready to succumb to it. And then Paul said, listen, fellas, brethren, sirs, I wish you would have listened to me in the beginning, because I was just trying to help. The Lord told me that this would be destructive. Okay? There was the acknowledgement of the choice. But then right after that came grace. God said, look, I have to stand before Caesar. This is something that he commanded me to do. So because of that, all of us, since I have to go, all of our lives will be saved. Our lives didn't have to be put into danger in the first place. But even though you made a choice, because think of it this way, even though the warning was there, even though they all sailed, it was quite possible, because Paul had to go before Caesar. It was quite possible that all of them could have died but Paul. And he still could have been afloat until a ship came and got him and then took him on to Rome. Everybody could have died, but God showed grace. They chose not to listen to Paul for whatever reason, even if it was just pure ignorance and acting upon what they thought was a better idea. Now, mind you, they didn't just treat Paul like a jerk, because remember, they gave him respect. They gave him the time to go talk to his friends. It seems that they gave him a run about the ship. So he and the ability to speak in front of them. They gave him audience. So they weren't just treating him like a jerk, but they also still didn't heed his warning. Because just because they weren't being a jerk to him doesn't mean that they were also giving him the ability to command instruction. They listened to the things he said, but that doesn't mean they listened to his instructions. And God still showed them grace. That he warned them, destruction is coming. And all could have died but Paul, because Paul had to go stand before Caesar, so God was going to preserve his life. But Paul's trying to warn them, fellas, you don't have to go through this. You could be okay if you just listen to me. They chose not to, yet in his grace and infinite mercy, though the cargo was destroyed, though the ship was destroyed, they were not destroyed. Matter of fact, another translation says, you won't even lose so much as a hair in this journey. Now, I think that's pretty cool, because how many of us have seen plenty of hair in clogged drains or the shower bottom from our heads when we just take a shower or if we wash our hair. Sometimes there's hair in the sink. Yet these men can go through a tumultuous storm and not lose a hair. That is some ultimate grace. God gave them grace they did not deserve because of choices they chose to do which were contrary to what God called them, what told them to do. I think what we can take from this, one of the things that can be taken, there's a lot of stuff here in Acts chapter 27 to chew on, and I encourage you, once we're done here, continue to chew on it. There's a lot more. The Bible is inexhaustible, okay? But one of the things I see here is that examine the grace. Examine the grace this way. How many of us have made choices? And we made choices to maybe take a job. We made choices to take a position in another state that God didn't necessarily tell us to do. We made a position to take a car or buy a car that we never asked God should we buy. And you may think, well, I don't need to ask God what kind of car I need to buy. Or we marry someone and there may be red flags and we still choose to marry that person. What if through all of those things, we may lose the car, we may lose the marriage, we may lose, as sad as that is, we may lose the house, but what if you don't lose your life? What if the grace of God sustains you and keeps you, even though those things you were trying to pursue and hold on to are laid to the side, are lost to the side? I bought a car once. I just gotten a new job. I'm going to end with this. I just got a new job, and the job had me going an hour one way to and from my job, and I had to get a new car. I really wanted this specific car. I really wanted this car, and it was a car I had wanted for over 10 years. And I was like, well, almost 10 years. And I was like, I want this car. Saw the car. I was able to get it. Had the money to do it. Got the car. Didn't ask God about it. Even had checks about it, but I had the money. I had a new position. I could pay for it. Got the car. Wound up wrecking the car. And then because of that, in the rain, wound up wrecking the car. Because of that, it was hard to get it fixed because we had some financial troubles that hit us around the same time. When all of that stuff happened, now I had to sit and walk every day past that car because I had to buy another car because this car was like totaled. I couldn't get rid of it. I was just in a position. I had to we had another member of the family. We had another member of the family born. All of these things, the financial troubles got even harder. And I wound up having to sell the car that I really wanted for all those years because I never asked God about it in the first place. Had I asked God, he would have showed me which car to get instead of burning all of this money on this car that I wound up pouring into that car unnecessarily. There are times when God tries to tell you something. I encourage you to listen to him. Listen to what he says, because he's leading you to try to tell you, because he can see what's down the road. He can see what's on the journey, even though we can't. He sees the storm. He sees the many days of darkness, possibly. All of us have had times in our lives where there were heavy storms. And he's trying to tell you, don't go that way because there's a storm. But if we don't listen, the storm may still come and our things may be destroyed. But God is gracious. And if we lean into him and trust him, he can still preserve our lives, like he did with Paul. He's got a calling for you. There's not a person that doesn't exist that he does not have a calling for. And if you will lean into him, he can preserve you. He can lead you. That's the best way. But he can also preserve you in it, bring you out of it, to still stand before those people that need to hear the gospel from your lips. Have a wonderful day, everyone. Please dig more and more into this. I'll tell you, there's a treasure trove here. All the chapters work together. Read the whole journey of this and let God lead you and guide you into all truth. He definitely wants to. All right? Walk with the King and be a blessing. Have an amazing day. God has called you to stand before someone like Caesar to give them the gospel. And he'll preserve you if you let him along the way. Bye, everyone.
Well, that's it for chapters 27 of the book of Acts. Thanks to Pastor PJ for that. Next week, we'll be here for the last week of the book of Acts, chapter 28 with Pastor Joy. She's going to close it all out for us, so you don't want to miss that. We're going to be here online and in person again on Sunday morning, 9 and 11. You can jump into the chat and join us there. You can meet us in the room. We'll save you a seat. It's going to be a great week here at Grace. All kinds of stuff happening. Go to gracesterling.com to find out about home groups and healing services and healing school and Activate School of Ministry and encounter nights that are happening on Wednesday nights. God is moving and you need to be a part of it. Be blessed and have a great week. We love you guys. Bye.